If you read the title, you know what I'm going to talk about, so I might as well just get right into it. Fairness in games is way overrated by critics, and I want to push back against that. Unfair challenges have their own benefits and can accomplish things that fair challenges never will. I'm not saying one way is better or worse. I'm saying both styles of game design can be done well, and unfair design can be used to make games more fun and interesting. Now, will the average person agree with this? No, but who cares about them? I'm going to go over some of the benefits that unfair design can bring to a game with specific examples. First off, I'm going to talk about tension and challenge. Think about this. Is a game better if every challenge is designed to be beaten on the first attempt? It would make the game less frustrating for some people, but it would also be predictable, easy, and boring. Having an element of surprise and a heavy punishment for dying can greatly affect the way players feel when they play the game. First of all, the players will feel a greater sense of accomplishment when they beat the challenge. Anything you do on your first try will feel like you didn't accomplish much at all. If the punishment for dying is something like losing a valuable resource or being forced to redo stuff, then there actually are consequences for dying, and each death will suck. Yes, this is a good thing. Getting good and learning is satisfying in and of itself, and as long as the challenge is consistent, then the player will keep learning and keep making progress on each attempt, whether they build up fundamental skills or consistency on that particular challenge. Here's an example. Think of the traps you see in Dark Souls levels or the catacombs in Elden Ring. Wouldn't those levels be way more boring if you could just run through them on your first try with no resistance? I can visualize the entirety of Sin's Fortress in my mind because I had to learn the level to avoid all the traps. I can see why some people might not find this very appealing, and it's definitely not fair, but that doesn't mean it's bad. And yes, I know you can technically see every trap before it kills you, but realistically, no one's going through Sin's Fortress on their first try without dying to a few of the traps. If the designers of Dark Souls were concerned with fairness in the sense of making challenges you can beat on your first try, we would have never gotten Sin's Fortress, and I think it's one of the best levels in the whole game. Would it have been better if they made a more straightforward combat gauntlet with a checkpoint or two thrown in? That could have been better, but that's not the point. The unfair challenge in Sin's Fortress accomplishes something that a straightforward one can't. See how unfairness can be fun and interesting if it's done well? There's a whole genre of indie games based on this concept. I Want to Be the Guy is the first that comes to my mind, but there are several others like Cat Mario and Kaizo Mario hacks. But the unfairness in these games adds more than just challenge and tension. Beginner's traps can add humor to a game directly through the level design. These apples in I Want to Be the Guy are definitely not fair, but you can learn this screen and eventually get through it. There's a lot of stuff in this game that will kill you instantly with no warning. When I was a kid, I'd watch Let's Plays of this game on YouTube and laugh at the reactions of the players. And honestly, going back to it now, like 16 years later, it's still funny even when you're the one that's dying. Fair games will never be able to do stuff like this. I think you get the idea. No need to keep going on about it. I do think fair games can add humor into level design, just not in this way. This is one way you can use unfairness to enhance a game. Also, I would like to point out that the examples I use in this section were all free indie games made by random people on the internet. Certain kinds of game design will never appear in big expensive games meant for mass consumption, but that's fine. Not every game needs to be the greatest thing ever created. Some games should focus on providing an interesting and unique experience that sets it apart from everything else. That's the benefit of indie games like these. They don't have to care about being fair or getting good reviews on Steam. The designer can do whatever he wants without caring about appealing to the mass market. Next, I'm going to look at RPGs and how unfairness can benefit them. But first, if you liked the vid so far, please consider liking and subscribing so I know people want to see more stuff like this. Imagine this. It's hell on earth. Demons are running around killing people and fighting the forces of heaven. Cults are popping up everywhere, worshipping either God or Satan. In other words, everything's fucked. Should this be an easy game where random encounters play fair? It wouldn't make sense if the demons played fair with you, and in Shin Megami Tensei 2, they don't. You can run into a random encounter that instantly kills your main character and gives you a game over. To some, probably most people, that sounds horrific. Why would anyone want to play a game like that? For me, and other fans of SMT, the challenge sounds fun, and it adds to the world of the game. The fact that it isn't fair makes sense. This is also a first-person dungeon crawler where random encounters don't have battle transitions, but they happen right where you're standing. Immersion is clearly a goal of this game, and having it be difficult and unfair adds to that. I love the fact that within the JRPG genre, you have more difficult games like SMT, and easy, more fair ones like Pokemon. There's room for both, and both are good. Here's an example from a strategy RPG. In Fire Emblem, you have two kinds of games. In some games, enemy reinforcements spawn, but they don't get to move till the next turn. In other games, they spawn in and move instantly. Sometimes NPCs on the map will try to warn you about the incoming ambush, but you don't always know exactly where they'll be coming from, or where their attack range is. There's a chance you could get unfairly ambushed and have a character die, making you reset the level or take the loss and keep going. Once you know where and when the enemy ambush will come, it's easy to reset and play around it. And I will admit that ambush spawns work better in some games and worse in others. In Fire Emblem 6, you have like 50 characters, and most of the time you can only bring like 12 of them to each map. And one of those slots is always occupied by Roy, the main character. You can afford to lose a lot of characters in FE6 and still make it to the end of the game. Playing around these losses and using unconventional strategies can be a lot of fun, and honestly, it enhances the story of the game. Every character has a unique death quote, and your own personal journey through the game will feel more impactful if you don't reset for every single death. Let's talk about a more general idea that affects everything I've said so far. It's common to hear people call arcade games quarter munchers, and to say that trial and error difficulty is bad. It's legitimate to not like games that test memorization, but why is it inherently bad for games to do that? Memory is a skill. It's a skill that's outside of pushing buttons on a controller, but it's still a skill that can be tested. Shoot 'em ups are the best example of games that test memorization. They're really hard, short, and consistent. When you're playing well in a shmup, it feels like you're on drugs. It's badass. Shmups are not nearly as popular as platformers or RPGs, but they're still good at what they do, and they do things that those other genres never or almost never do. How about this? Is it fair for games to hide very valuable items without giving any hints? In Zelda 1, you could easily go the whole game without finding some of the extra hearts behind the bombable walls. You don't need these to beat the game, but they really help. They don't just give you more health, they give you access to the stronger swords. You only need 5 hearts to get the second sword, and I think you need like 10 to get the best one. There's 3 hidden hearts behind unmarked walls, so you could get the second sword before you do any of the dungeons, and the best sword 3 dungeons earlier than normal. I don't think anyone would say these hidden hearts make Zelda an unfair game, but on their own, these are unfairly hidden because there's no indication that you should bomb these walls. But to beat the game, you do have to bomb some walls in the dungeons, and the final dungeon is behind a bombable wall in the overworld. Once you learn that you can bomb walls, maybe you would think to bomb more walls on your next playthrough, especially since you beat the game without 2 full rows of hearts. You would know that you definitely missed some secrets. The point of me bringing this up is that this game design is not fair, but it does reward experimentation. I would argue that Zelda 1 rewards experimentation more than any of the games that have cracked walls. In later Zelda games, a cracked wall is like a locked door, and a bomb is a key. In Zelda 1, you just have to try stuff and see what happens. It might be a bit of a stretch to say those secrets that are hidden without clues are unfair, but my main point is, it can be good when games test you on more than just pure technical skill, whether they do it in a fair way or not. So we've talked about a bunch of unfair challenges that are still consistent, but what about challenges that are unfair and inconsistent? Can that be used in a way that doesn't suck? Games with a lot of randomization, like Rogue and the Mystery Dungeon games, do not have a consistent level of challenge. You can be on a great run and then get randomly screwed and have to start over from the beginning. But that's the fun of it. Every run through the game or dungeon will be unique. If the game was meant to be perfectly fair with a handcrafted challenge on each floor, then it would just be a below average action game. There's nothing wrong with handcrafted levels, but the randomization is what makes this game special. Having inconsistent challenge and randomized levels accomplishes something that handcrafted levels can't. Is randomization fair? You could get super lucky, or you could get screwed, and it's not up to you or your skill level whether that happens. I'm not a big fan of roguelikes, but I do appreciate the fact that they create a unique experience that I'll never get from a regular action or RPG game. You could extend this principle out to other games with random elements, like the Nuzlocke challenge in Pokemon games. If you don't know what the challenge is, just look it up, but you probably already know. You could get really good encounters and beat the game easily, or worthless encounters that force you to think outside the box. There's even some ROM hacks like Pokemon Radical Red that randomize late game bosses to an extent. I think you get the idea. Fairness is good, but it can't do everything that unfairness can do. There is no perfect template for game design. It's fine to prefer one style over another, but I think it's wrong to say a certain style is objectively bad or worse. If every game tried to be as fair as possible, I think gaming in general would be less interesting. I have a few more thoughts on this topic that don't need much elaboration. Unfair challenge isn't always a cynical tactic to extract more time and money from the player. This has been done in the past and is still done today with mobile games and pay-to-win incentives, but that's totally separate from what I'm talking about. I hate that shit. That would be an example of unfairness that's actually bad. A game that's super hard but technically beatable, but also has a pay-to-win option that makes it easy. I don't play gacha games, but that's what I imagine they're like. I prefer difficult games with fair challenges, but I still value the experiences that unfair games can give me. Really, my favorite thing is a game that's mostly fair and consistent, with a dash of bullshit here and there just to spice things up. Knowing that an unfair challenge is possible is all that matters. It can be completely unfair and brutal, but as long as the player knows it's possible, they will get good and beat it. I spent all this time defending unfairness, but is there anything I wouldn't defend? The only thing I would have a hard time defending is boredom. A boring game is the worst kind of game. But I do think, in very specific circumstances, a boring section of a game can be used to contrast with a more exciting moment. Boring parts can create a certain mood that benefits the game in the big picture, but the boredom can't last too long, or else it'll just suck and be a waste of time. Alright, I think that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope I was able to show you the benefits that come from unfair game design. And I think a lot of people feel the same way as me, but you never really see people talk about games like this. Anyway, if you liked it, please hit like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And yeah, see ya.